So today, this sustainability and success, stability in our beekeeping, it's a very difficult thing. Everybody that comes into beekeeping, all the hobby beekeepers, usually their biggest complaint is, I keep losing my bees. So there's about 7 things that as a beekeeper you need to learn and know how to do to change that from losing your bees every winter to being successful. I'm going to cover those over the course of today and the other 3 sessions. And it's going to be managing our existing / overwintered colonies, queens, whether we're grafting queens, letting our bees make the queens, or whether we're buying some queens, swarm management, creating nukes and splits, providing proper nutrition when required for our bees, managing our pests, primarily our mites, our varroa mites, and then how to successfully overwinter our colonies. Now, as we talk about this, I'm going to talk about how I do it and how I do it here in Pennsylvania, Northeast Pennsylvania. Today was, when I got up this morning, it was 10 degrees, very cold. We're right in the middle of winter up here. You're going to have to take what I tell you and adapt it to your area where you're keeping your bees. And when I do my beekeeping, everything I do in my beekeeping is planned around my nectar flow. I have 2 nectar flows in my area of Pennsylvania. I have a spring flow and I have a fall flow. And in between those 2, I have a summer dearth. So all of my beekeeping is done around that. And the 7 things I mentioned are the things that you have to do and you have to adapt to your site. So the first thing we're going to talk about is managing our existing / overwintered colonies. A lot of people come to me and say, my bees starved last winter, or when I opened them up this spring, this was happening, or that was, the food was gone, the bees were dead, they were all up top. I said, did you check them through the winter? And they say, no. I've been told never open my colony in the wintertime. And I tell people that's completely wrong. How do you know if your bees are starving? You can stop them from starving if you open them up and see them up there. When you come in spring and they're all dead because they starved, it's too late. So what I do through the whole season is plan things out, always know the status of my colonies. I take notes as I go. And my beekeeping year can start as early as January, depending on how early my spring is. This year it's a lot colder, a lot longer, so I haven't gotten into my colonies yet. It's going to get up into about 40 degrees next week, so I'm going to start peeking in my colonies. Now, I'm not telling you I'm going to open my colonies and I'm going to pull frames. I'm definitely not going to do that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to every one of my colonies. I'm going to take the lid off. I'm just going to gently lift up and peek and see where they are. Now, if my bees are all at the top, I know they're starving, right? So that gives me the opportunity to put some feed on there, whether I put a winter patty on or some fondant or some dry sugar, but I have that opportunity to feed them before they starve. I can also look and judge the strength of that colony. If sometimes, now I'm showing you here with a single deep, I run with double deeps in the wintertime. Sometimes I won't see the bees. I'll open it and I see nothing, but I give a rap on the side and I listen and I can hear those bees. I know they're alive and they're still down below. That's a sign that they still have plenty of feed in there. And I can also check the honey stores by just looking down into the frames to see where they are, how much feed they have. And I'll make notes on every single colony. Why am I doing that? Number one, like I said, I could put feed on here if they're short. If they're not, if they're looking good, great. If they're dead, I write down in my book that one's a dead out. I do use winter rims, so I have room to put feed on. I like these running with a rim on my tops in the wintertime. So it just gives you a lot more options for controlling moisture and feeding, things like that. So I go through my winter from, say, March, late March, into starting into early April. I'll go in there maybe every 2 weeks, just take a peek and see where my bees are. When I start getting closer to April, now I know the strength of that colony, if it's alive. If it's not, I know that colony's got to be repopulated. When we get to spring, that's when we can get our bees, or we can get queens. By the time I get to the beginning of April, I know which of my colonies are dead, which ones are okay, but they're not super strong, and which ones are going to need to be split because they're really strong. I judge my nectar flow based on the dandelion bloom here. That's what tells me that my nectar flow is about to start. So when I get to dandelion bloom, I've already got my plan what I'm going to do. I've already ordered my queens. I already know what colonies I'm going to split, and I take it from there. This is an important thing because we lose a lot of bees in the wintertime. We all do. But when you come into spring, that's your opportunity to replace those dead outs. And too many people don't take advantage of that. They would rather take this hive that did make it, and they think it's going to make them a lot of honey, and then this hive ends up swarming. So what we want to do in the springtime is we get there, we see this is a very strong colony. So I look at this coming into the middle to the end of March. I see it's very strong for that time of year. I know when I get to the end of April, these bees are going to start swarm preparation when my nectar flow starts in earnest. So I've ordered some queens. So what I do, the biggest mistake that I think a lot of people do is they try to manage a swarm in their colony by adding more boxes, honey supers, whatever. That won't do. It doesn't stop swarming. Swarming is a natural instinct. So the first thing you need to do in the springtime, when you assess that colony and it looks good and it's growing, is you need to split it. Again, I said in my case, that is when the dandelions bloom. I know that when my dandelions bloom, from that point on, my nectar flow usually runs through about the end of June, beginning of July. If I don't do anything with that colony that's super strong, it's going to swarm right as we're coming into the main nectar flow. I'm going to lose half to 3/4 of my bees to the swarm, and this hive's not going to produce me honey. So I've ordered my queen. I come in here at dandelion bloom, and I look in here. It's warm enough now that I can work this colony. I'll go into this colony pulling frames. First, what I really want to do is find my queen. I'll find the frame my queen is on, and I'll put her into an empty nuke box I have on the side to get it out of the way. Then I'm going to take this hive. Now, this hive is in a single deep, but normally, like I said, I run in double deeps. So I'm going to go through both of these boxes. I'm going to break this colony down so it's only got 5 frames of brood. All the rest of the brood, I'm going to put in a nuke box. I've got a nuke box ready to go. I'll take the lid off. I'll put those 5 frames in here. I want a lot of brood. I like to have a lot of capped brood in this one. I want to shake a lot of nurse bees in here. And I've got my queen I ordered now because I planned it ahead of time, got her delivered to me on Thursday or Friday, and I'm going to do this work on my day off on Saturday. I'm going to make this nuke. So what have I done? I've made this colony that overwintered, was very strong. I've taken away their swarm, their urge to swarm, because I made them think they already did. I took the young bees, the nurse bees, I took a lot of that brood and put it in here. I gave this one a new queen. And now this one I've added, the frames I've removed and put into my nuke box, I've replaced with drawn comb in here. So there's no congestion now. I've taken away the young bees, the nurse bees, I've taken away a lot of brood, and I've given them open drawn comb. So the swarm pressure is off. The end result of this is that this colony, because I did it so early, I did it at that dandelion bloom for me, this is going to build up and it's going to make me honey. And if I manage this nuke properly, by the time it grows into a full box, I can manage this one to make me honey in the spring too. So I've done a few things. Prevented swarming from this colony. And if I had a dead out over here, I've just replaced it with this nuke, which will grow into a full colony by the time we get to fall. And that's probably one of the things that most people don't do. You make that assumption that this colony is very strong coming into spring. It's going to make me so much honey. Chances are, if it's coming in, coming into spring very strong, it is going to swarm on you. So you've lost. Not only have you gotten some of your hives have died over winter, you've lost them. Now you lost one of your resources to replace that colony. So you're going to go out and you're going to have to buy a nuke. You're going to have to buy a package to sustain your apiary. What if all of your colonies lived? You're still going to go in there and break them down into nuke boxes. So what you've done is you've grown your apiary. That's the way to do increases. We want to learn to do increases via splits, making our own queens. And like I said, the first thing to do in the spring is start looking at those colonies as soon as the temperature allows you to lift and look. We don't want to start pulling frames till we get about 50 degrees. We don't want to pull them out for very long, but we can get a look at things. But we can certainly get a great idea of our colony. And again, depends where you are. I'm sure down in Florida, you could be looking at your colonies in January. Up here in PA, I've done it as early as the middle of February in a very early spring. And I've done it as late as the end of March. This year, it looks like next week or so is going to hit the 40s, I'll be able to start lifting and looking to see where I'm at. That is the first step in building sustainability, is managing those overwintered colonies. Okay? Now, the next time we talk, we're going to talk about coming out of the winter and into true spring, what we need to do with swarm management, creating more splits, because sometimes we won't need to split these right away in spring, but we'll want to do a split later, and we'll talk about that. We're going to talk about how to requeen our colonies, when we're going to have to buy queens, when we can raise queens, and how to plan that along with when we're making splits. We can let our bees raise our own queens, or we can graft them. And there's reasons why we want to do one or the other. We'll cover that. We're going to cover nutrition. Too many people don't understand how nutrition works in honeybees, what's required for them to continue to raise brood. We'll cover that as well. And the importance of mites, treating for mites. Too many people ignore, either they don't treat for mites or they treat at the wrong time or the wrong way. Mites are probably the biggest problem we have in beekeeping. All the other issues probably come from mites, and we were going to cover that, go over that pretty well when we talk about that. So that's about it for today. I just wanted to get in the spring management and looking at these colonies. Don't be afraid to lift the lid. You know, somebody told me, like I said, you know, I was told never to look at my colonies in the wintertime. Okay, look in the spring and you lift the lid and they're dead because they starved. Let's be proactive with our colonies. Too many people are hands off their colonies. We want to look at them. We want to take action while we can, while they're alive, not after they die. If you have any questions on this session today, let me know. We'll get those answered. And I look forward to talking to you next week. I suggest everybody get a notebook that they dedicate to their colonies, to their beekeeping, and you make notes. Like I said to you at the start of this, every one of my colonies I have notes on. So when I come to spring, I can know before I open that lid what that colony is going to look like, and I prepared for it and I planned. We got a couple of questions. I'll see if I can get these answered. Okay, somebody said, how can I find out when my nectar flow is? Well, there's a few different ways. Number one, if you join a club in your area, any of the seasoned beekeepers, the guys who've been doing it for years, can tell you when it starts and stops. Another way is when you go into your colony, when you start lifting that lid and examining your colony in the spring, there'll come a point where you see a lot of brand new white wax, very white, on top of this frame. That's a sign of an incoming nectar flow. When there's a nectar flow on, it stimulates the wax glands of the honeybees, and they start shedding a lot of wax scales. So you'll see white wax on top of here. Another way to know your nectar flow is you look at the drawn comb. You'll see open wet nectar, not capped honey, open wet nectar in a lot of cells. That's a sign of an incoming honey flow. Another one, a nectar flow, is when you see the bees. You know, normally the bees are going out, they're coming back. When they're leaving, like they're on a mission, like rockets taking off, that's a good sign that there's a flow on. Now, when it comes to pollen, that's easy. You look and you watch the bees coming and going. You see the pollen in the pollen baskets. Somebody said, do you do the lift test on hive bodies? I do, but that doesn't tell me if my bees are alive. For those of you who don't know what the lift test is, when you know in the fall, when you know your hive is got a good population of bees in it, and it's full of honey for the winter time, you're ready to go into winter. If you go behind that colony and you lift it up like this, and you just kind of, after it takes like a little bit of time to, you know, judgment. How heavy is that? It's really heavy, good, it's full. You come back in the spring and you lift it up really easily. You know it's light on feed. You can do that, but that generally won't tell me the status of my bees. But if it's really cold, that might be an option for you. Just lift it up if you don't want to lift that lid, and you'll know if they're getting close to running out of food. So that's not a bad thing to do. I used to do that a lot. I don't do it anymore because, like I said, I just prefer to lift that lid. I can see down the seams of the frames. I could tell if there's still capped honey in there, and I can see where that cluster of bees are. If they're right up top, when bees are out of food, they start in the winter at the very bottom, and they work their way up through the hive as you progress through winter into spring. If I take the lid off at the top box and I see a lot of bees right here, I know they're out of feed pretty much. But if I see them way down there and I can see some capped honey, I know they're still fine. So I generally don't do the lift anymore. The next question is, can you provide empty frames and let the bees draw their own comb? You can do that, but not when you're trying to prevent swarming. Bees don't see foundation as available space. They only see drawn comb as available space. So if you're trying to stop the swarming instinct, you really want to replace that comb with drawn comb. And that's a reason I say to people, one of your best resources is extra drawn comb. When you have a dead out or, or sometimes I've used deeps to use as a honey super. If I know next year that I'm gonna expand my apiary, so I need some more drawn comb, in the fall for say my goldenrod crop, I'll put a deep box on top with foundation. I'll let the bees draw it out, fill it with honey. Then when I extract that honey, now I've got a box full of deep drawn comb to use in the springtime for when I pull these out and put into the nukes. I take my stored drawn comb and I replace it in here. So don't use foundation. It will not stop that swarming instinct. That's all the questions we've got so far. If you have any more, just put them in on Facebook. We'll get them answered a little bit later. And again, I look forward to talking to you next week. We're going to cover a lot more topics. I think that's all I've got for today. Thank you.